O Lord of hosts, be with us, for we have none other help in times of adversity but Thee. O Lord of hosts, have mercy on us.
And so I put this little document together here that is hitting, again, it just provides a little bit of an overview. Obviously, he's a German immigrant. He was his family moved as an infant. He got a BA in philosophy at Stanford, went to law school at Stanford. And then, of course, he's part of the PayPal mafia. We've discussed this. I did a whole stream on the background of Elon Musk. And so eventually they sell it for 1.5 billion to eBay, and this is what then creates these multi-millionaire PayPal mafias that then invested their money and funded companies like YouTube, LinkedIn, Tesla, Palantir. And so Palantir in particular, and I actually have something to show you guys, because Peter Thiel is getting ready to start a new endeavor, which is an all-digital bank for your crypto and your digital wallet. And we're going to come back to it in a second, because he's also appealing back to the Tolkien universe. It's funny how, like, Palantir are the Seeing Stones in the Lord of the Rings. It's funny how he's like obsessively using the Tolkien mythology for his companies, which are clearly going to be used by an authoritarian figure. And so, you know, one of the things that Thiel talks about that, well, it'll come up, but he's actually like not big on liberal democracies, which we could absolutely agree with him on. And he's actually given lip service to some type of monarchy. And we've talked about Curtis Yarvin and some of his ideas. That's going to come up in here. But, you know, it's just the blind spot of Peter Thiel is so astounding that he doesn't see the companies he's investing in, and doesn't even, and in the same breath talking about American liberty, will not then criticize what Palantir is doing. Or again, the targets, like the IDF was bragging. I read an article, was bragging about how Palantir was a force multiplier because it allowed them to identify Hamas targets better. Well, you know, how many hundreds of thousands of civilians have been killed by the IDF? And Palantir is the one selecting their targets. So that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I'd be so proud. And so it's named after, as I said, the Seeing Stones, Palantir Technology. It's a big data analytics company. Again, and who are their biggest clients? So Peter Thiel is this big critic of liberal democracies, woke culture, the federal government, entrenched bureaucracies. And then who's Palantir's biggest clients? The CIA, the FBI, you know, it says ICE, U.S. military, but basically it plays a central role in mass surveillance, intelligence, law enforcement, and quote unquote predictive analytics. So they track, you know, I watched the CEO one time of Palantir talk about how they have a digital profile on everybody in the United States. I mean, this was specifically on the United States. I'm sure most people who access the internet, but at least in the United States, Palantir has a profile on you. The ads that you're getting, all these analytics are being purchased from somebody, and Palantir is the one with the government contracts that allows them to monitor everything you do digitally. And they have the profile on you. So just FYI. And so why is Palantir so controversial? Well, one of its secret and powerful, considered one of the most secretive and powerful tech firms. It's criticized for civil libertarians, which ironically, Peter Thiel describes himself as a conservative libertarian. Interesting. And lauded by national security hawks and warmongers as a backbone of modern counterterrorism and defense intelligence. I've yet to see exactly how efficacious these predictive abilities of Palantir is to stop crime. But anyways, and then he's part of the Founders Fund. It's a venture capital firm. And they were behind Facebook, SpaceX, Airbnb, Stripe, and Anduril Industries, which are going to come back in just a moment. They are an autonomous military defense system. And this is who the CEO of this company, which is, what's his name? Palmer Luckey. Palmer Luckey. He's like this kind of hippie dude who's actually the CEO of this AI military defense company, Anduril. And he is who Peter Thiel is getting ready to go into work with and partner for creating a new digital bank. So, oh, that's great. The founder of Palantir, who gets all the government contracts, and then the founder of Anduril, who makes all the autonomous weaponry for the U.S. military, they're going to control your bank account and your crypto wallet. What could go wrong? And so, of course, Mithril Capital, this is how he knows, J.D. Vance, vice president of the Trump administration. And that is a growth stage investment fund, kind of an intermediary between venture capitalists and private equity. And then he has other industries he's invested in. But like I said, he claims to be a libertarian or now a post-libertarian. So he's big on free markets, anti-globalism, and personal liberty. But as since his turn to what he described as like he's a post-libertarian now, he's a reactionary futurist, as he's described. And he's criticized democracy as incompatible with technological progress. Now, I wouldn't say it's incompatible with technological progress, but I would say it's incompatible with human liberty and human freedom. And he said, I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible. I would totally agree with that. I think in the idea that we can actually have say and control of our political destiny in various these Western democratic nations. I mean, that has been proven to be false, whether it be the nationalist populist movements in Europe, or obviously that everything that's happened in the U.S. is we're run by a deep state, and doesn't matter how many people you vote for, AIPAC and the entrenched lobbyist groups, they're going to ultimately have sway over who does what. Doesn't matter who you vote for. So democracy, in a sense, is coming to an end. Like young people, I would say millennials and Gen Zers are way less thrilled about the expansion of democracy in the Middle East, like the Bush administration. That rhetoric isn't going to sell much. In fact, Thiel, I keep calling him Peter Thiel, has even give lip service to the promotion of monarchy, which I'm going to highlight in just a second. So obviously he's been a supporter of Donald Trump. And even in the interview that we listened to, he's more a supporter of Donald Trump, not so much that, some of the nationalist policies Thiel is in favor of, but essentially the tech oligarchs have made an agreement that if they're going to change the status quo of Silicon Valley and kind of their industries, Trump is the only option. He literally essentially says this in the interview. And, he's funded conservative candidates like Blake Masters and J.D. Vance. His big things right now is the threat of China, woke capitalism, and Silicon Valley's progressive monoculture. Now, as I said, he is very, very much a supporter of Israel. And Palantir is one of their biggest clients outside of the U.S. government and our intelligence agencies is Israel. I mean, Palantir is totally embedded into the Israeli military and how exactly they go about some of their combat missions and finding which targets they're going to terminate, which, as we've seen, has been actually a significant amount of civilians. So whether that's deliberate, you would think it would be if Palantir is touting all of the technological advance that they have. So anyways, religiously, he does identify as Christian, and he's been doing this more recently in the last 3 to 4 years. As I said, the Hoover Institute interview we covered before, Thiel explicitly described himself as a Christian, and I've never heard him actually face the fact that how do you deal with Christianity being your professed religious identity, and you're also a homosexual. I'm just curious how exactly he squares that circle in his own mind. I've never heard anybody ask him about that. But he claims to be, again, influenced by Rene Girard. In his mimetic desire, deeply shaped Thiel's views on competition, violence, human nature. And then, his Christianity is obviously at odds with his transhumanist desires. Now, I wouldn't say he is one of the most enthusiastic members of the transhumanist community. He's certainly part of the community. I mean, even in the interview we're getting ready to go over here in just a few minutes, he is specifically talking in favor of transhumanism, life extension, or full human integration with technology. And how exactly does that work with somebody who's professing that we're made in the image of God? I'm very curious. And that's where this Christianity, it almost feels like it's a form of rhetoric. We talked about this with Elon Musk. They're like the ultimate gaslighters. They say one thing and do the exact opposite, or do one thing and then say the exact opposite. Either way, it's like Elon Musk is totally gaslighting us in so many different circumstances. I did a whole stream covering all these different circumstances. And Thiel, in some way, does the same thing because he uses the rhetoric of Christian eschatology and yet then claims that all the enterprises he's building have nothing to do with it. The Antichrist is just like some Luddite, woke, trans person who controls like a world government or something. It's like, no, that's not. And he even talks about like Orthodox Christianity in our interview today that we'll be going over. And so for him, the Christian rhetoric of the end times is just a way to describe something that would prevent the technological singularity. I haven't heard him say these words, but I'm going to phrase it the way that I interpret what he says. Essentially, the singularity is for him the second coming of Christ. And this is essentially the paradigm and the worldview of what's called Christian transhumanism. It's a very small, insignificant group. Actually, I think they're located, the head of it is in Tennessee. But it's a group of these progressive, non-denominational Christians who think that by appealing to science and technological advance, it somehow makes them like more in tune and intellectually sophisticated with their Christian faith. And their platform is that transhumanism and full transhuman integration into eternal life is the point of Christian salvation, and that science are gifts of grace from Christ so that we can then become like him. And this is essentially Christian transhumanism. And it sounds like Thiel is something of this nature, although he doesn't speak in those terms. He speaks as if he's somehow a more traditionally minded Christian, even though everything you hear him advocate totally conflates with that being the case. And so because technological advance for him fights the forces of evil, he then views himself and Palantir and all the AI and the tech companies he invests in as fighting the forces of evil, and therefore they cannot be contributing to the Antichrist. That's essentially his opinion. And again, it's so ironic that the same liberal democracies that he's criticizing are the ones that are then the biggest contractors with Palantir. Again, weird contradiction there. Professing to be a homosexual or professing to be a Christian and living as a homosexual, interesting contradiction there, especially when you're noted. I mean, since his undergraduate times, he was known for like conservative libertarian political causes. This was before maybe he was homosexual, or certainly he was outed by Gawker about being one. So again, much of him is a contradiction, and when you hear him talk about Christianity, you wonder if he's like internally convicted and is conflicted with his sexual orientation and then the things that he says, because they seem so out of whack sometimes. But he's funded Aubrey de Grey and the Methuselah Foundation. This is Aubrey de Grey's been on Joe Rogan multiple times. He's a researcher on life extension. And even though he calls AI the most anti-Christian technology, this is Peter Thiel, he literally invests in it regarding almost most of his companies are using it. So again, it's just like Elon Musk, like giving lip service to conservatives and Christianity, and then wearing his Halloween costume called the Devil's Advocate, or yeah, it's like, what? It's just a total contradiction. I almost think they're like gaslighting or something. So, here's a little bit about the Gawker lawsuit. I'm not going to get into these details. I want to dive into the actual interview that we're going to discuss today. But here's in 2019, it says, "I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible." True. And then he endorsed monarchism as potentially superior to democracy. Well, hey, that's an Orthodox Christian position. I'm all for that. I believe that monarchy is a superior position. And so he's mentioned about, again, Mencius Moldbug, Curtis Yarvin, in regards to his endorsement of monarchism. And he funded the Seasteading Institute, which seeks to build sovereign floating cities immune from state regulation. So he's been accused of being anti-democratic, elitist, technocratically authoritarian. His critics have said that he's trying to undermine liberal democratic institutions through neo-feudal ideas and such of that. I had a little bit section here in regard to Peter Thiel or Palantir's role in Israel and everything that they're doing. So Palantir software, especially Gotham and Foundry and Meta Constellation, has been used for predictive policing, immigration and customs enforcement, border surveillance, facial recognition. And what I told you guys, and in fact, we could pull the clip up if you wanted, that when J.D. Vance was on his latest appearance on Theo Von, the comedian, Thiel was actually giving legitimate criticisms of Palantir and asked J.D. Vance what his thoughts were. And he immediately says, well, I think it's going to be a great technology to prevent illegal immigrants from coming here. And I said this before these things even came into the news, that J.D. Vance's association with Peter Thiel makes him the perfect Trojan horse for bringing forth the utilization of these digital technologies and AI and mass surveillance for predictive policing policies in the name of conservative political policies. So in the name of making sure illegals aren't here, or making sure illegals can't work as undocumented workers, we need to go ahead and allow Palantir to mass surveil everything. I mean, that is J.D. Vance's essential position. And so it's something to keep an eye out for. Domestic international counterterrorism. And again, when Palantir's connections to Israel, I think it's a little concerning that if there was a false flag operation inside the domestic United States, and Palantir was the basis for us saying who somebody was working with or affiliated with, it's not a stretch of the imagination to imagine that there might be a false flag potentially done by Israel for the benefit of Israel and the United States, the military-industrial complex, to furthering conflict in the Middle East, which would make Palantir more and more money, and we could get more and more contracts. That doesn't seem an impossibility to me. Tracking pandemic and vaccine logistics, Palantir. So get your Vax card, guys. Palantir is going to be making sure that they can give you access to your daily necessities. Oh, you're not jabbed? Palantir says you can't buy groceries today. Oh, and your crypto that's in Thiel's new crypto bank, digital bank. Oh yeah, you've said naughty things online. You criticize him for being a homosexual, which he put Gawker out of business for. Military targeting, battlefield intelligence. That's what the IDF touts about Palantir and how they've been using it. Corporate espionage, financial fraud detections, that type of stuff. And so their role in the Ukraine conflict, Palantir's had a strong military relationship with the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense since 2020. Again, same thing, target identification, artillery and drone coordination, satellite imaging interpretation, logistics and troop movement. Again, how interesting that we have somebody like J.D. Vance who's, I'm against the Ukraine war. I'm against us getting involved in wars, although he's still kind of warmongers in regards to Iran. And yet the companies and the peoples that he's associated with in the circles that he moves in, such as Palantir, are literally directly involved in the Ukraine-Russian conflict. And the idea that, one, they're not utilizing new techniques, new research techniques and developments that they've come to on the battlefield to see how effective they are. Like, don't you guys see how Palantir is the establishment? If you want to use this, I mean, Trump's part of the establishment at this point, but Trump was anti-Ukraine, right? Anti-Ukraine Russian war. He's gonna stop it in the first couple of days. Well, it hasn't stopped, and the irony is J.D. Vance and Thiel have direct connections. Thiel in particular to Palantir, who then is literally the backbone of the Ukraine military operations. Like, what are we doing here? What? Of course, the very, very close ties, as I said, outside the U.S. military industrial complex. Israel is the biggest contractor of Palantir. And so they have multiple offices in Israel, is what I found. And they've worked closely with the IDF, Mossad, Shin Bet, and Israeli border control and national security agencies, monitoring Palestinians, predictive analytics in Gaza. And again, they've touted Palantir as a force multiplier for the Israelis. And what has Palantir, what do we know that they've done? Oh, surveillance and occupied population, civilian targeting risk in Gaza and the West Bank. Wow. So this predictive crime programming, predictive stopping of crime before it ever happens. Their technology is actually going out and literally targeting civilians in Gaza and the West Bank. Wow, what a great company. Very, very interesting. And so last thing I want to show you, though, is just a little bit of an overview in regards to his theological stuff and how we would see it as Orthodox Christians, because I want this frame to be in mind as we move through the interview. The interview is only a little over an hour. And I'm sure we'll be stopping and discussing things multiple times, but this is how we as Orthodox Christians kind of see this. These are just general outlines regarding eschatology in the view of history. The world is fallen, but redeemable through Christ, obviously. Human will, our free will, must be synergized with God's will. That's the goal of every Christian. The church is the ark of salvation. It's again resisting the spirit of the world and calling humanity to repentance. Obviously, Orthodox Christianity being the only one that still isn't fully corrupted. Not that there aren't attempts and influences within the church, but what church is resisting the spirit of the world more than the Orthodox Church? The Antichrist is not only a future person, which we absolutely believe, but is also a general spirit that operates now in systems of technocratic control, apostasy, and dehumanization, all of which I would argue the things that Thiel promotes are actually doing. So our eschatological vision includes the rise of a global regime of deceit where truth is replaced with illusions and man is offered false immortality without God, i.e. transhumanism. Perfect. Okay. Let's look at Thiel's and an Orthodox perspective on Thiel and some of his companies. So we believe man is made in the image of God. Orthodox anthropology centers on the mystery of the human person. And here's Thiel's contradictions, even though he actually gives lip service, like he's actually speaking for an Orthodox Christian perspective. I don't know if he meant Eastern Orthodox or just like a correct Christian position, but he uses that language, that verbiage in the interview. And that through Palantir, Thiel promotes predictive surveillance, treating man as a node in a data stream rather than a free being. Wouldn't the predictive abilities, predictive surveillance of Palantir insinuate that Thiel believes that our environment is more determined than it is actually causally connected with human free will? Isn't that the whole basis, is that they can then find what you're going to do before you do it because they already know everything you've looked at? They've analyzed the outputs and inputs, and they know what inputs are going into your brain, so they know how you're going to react next. That doesn't sound like someone totally made in the image of God. And again, this represents a neo-Gnostic attempt to achieve omniscience through technology, which he very much talks about, a counterfeit to divine providence. The Orthodox Church teaches that true knowledge of persons come through love and divine illumination, not through analytic domination. And so surveillance technology anticipates the mark of the beast, wherein no one can buy or sell without being tracked or verified. The system trains souls to accept total control for the sake of safety and efficiency. And so what does Palantir do? They make sure you have your Vax card. They make sure that they can track everywhere you go at any time. They make sure that they know what ads you've looked at for how long and what items you've clicked on and what was the latest thing you looked at on Amazon. Wow, that almost sounds like the total system of control that Christians are actually worried about regarding the end times and the Antichrist. Wonder how Thiel doesn't see any of this at all connected. Again, for him, the Antichrist is someone who prevents technological advance and what he calls advocates for a stagnation. So this violates our doctrine of theosis. Our goal is not technological ascension, but theosis, participation in divine energies through repentance. Thiel's transhumanist affiliations, funds life extension technology, cryonics, AI human integration, and radical biotechnology. And he endorses thinkers who believe death is a disease to be conquered, not a consequence of sin to be transfigured in Christ. So we can see, again, his Rene Girard's mimetic. That's really all his Christianity is. It's like a Petersonian utilitarian symbol set. And that Christianity just has really great symbols. They're really powerful mimetic symbols. And that we just have to use the rhetoric then of the book of Revelation for him and Christian eschatology to talk about secular things. Because clearly he doesn't believe in anything literally. Transhumanism is a Luciferian parody of the resurrection. You guys know that's my general thoughts there. The attempt to escape death through technology is a rejection of Christ, who conquered death by becoming man and dying for us. Thiel's investments encourage a vision of the world where man becomes God without God, fulfilling the original sin of Eden. And so his political vision, he advocates for a post-democratic, elite-driven, technocratic civilization. So it sounds very much like the Republic in Plato's terms, right? We're going to be led by the oligarchs, the smartest and wisest among us, who also live the most debaucherous and immoral lives possible. I'm with him in regards to being post-democratic. I think more and more young people are jumping onto this bandwagon. I do think the general support and belief, let's just say the cultural belief and expectation in liberal democracies has absolutely diminished. I don't think that can be a controversial fact. It's absolutely diminished. And the promise of freedom and like civil agency through these democratic institutions, we know that this is all fake. This is absolutely fake. So when he's talking about a neo-monarchy, okay, I can be in favor of a monarchy. However, his monarchy is something that's, again, like super high tech. It's like a Silicon Valley monarchy over the general population. Well, my monarchy has to be submitting to the authority of the church, right? Monarchy is totalitarian authoritarianism if it's not paired with the wisdom of Christianity and the wisdom of the Holy Orthodox Church. So, yeah, I'm not, I would be really skeptical of the type of monarchy that they're advocating for, but that is in line with the general trend of young people, and I would say our culture, generally speaking. And so he supports candidates with, this was, again, what one source said, authoritarian tendencies, but they do certainly fund geopolitical control technologies. So is J.D. Vance an authoritarian? I don't know if he is. He might be. I'm certainly skeptical of him regarding the utilization of these technologies and his association with Thiel. But that is the irony, right? Thiel talks about how he's so anti-globalist, and yet the people he partners with, these major corporations, these central banks, these powerful elite figures of various nations, they are globalists. So again, like, what gives? What's with all the hypocrisy and the contradictions in people like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk? Unless it's all deliberate. It's all sort of a game. It's a game of chess. It's that they have multiple pieces on different parts of the game board, and so they can always shift and maneuver. And so warning signs in Thiel's vision: the fusion of military power, AI, and social control, the replacement of community with algorithmic management. Again, all of these things that he's contributing to, the replacement of God's providence with predictive data modeling, the centralization of power in the hands of elites. Now, he's against the centralization of global power, but at the same time constantly speaks of how we need to centralize power amongst, essentially the elite, those that are capable, those that are competent, and that the stagnation has to do with the woke culture of allowing incompetent people to occupy places of power. I don't disagree with him on that criticism, but I certainly don't want him and his ilk controlling our civilization or the federal government. And so, to conclude here, and then let's get into his actual interview. Thiel is not a cartoon villain. His vision is seductive, partially true, and deeply dangerous. To the Orthodox Christian, his life's work can be interpreted as a highly intelligent attempt to build a post-human world, one that rejects the repentance and death, replaces love with surveillance, elevates power over humility, and constructs a digital kingdom in place of the kingdom of God. The saints have warned us that the Antichrist will appeal not to obvious evil, but to the idolatry of solutions, false peace, false unity, false immorality. In this sense, Peter Thiel's empire of ideas and machines may be seen as building the infrastructure for Antichrist rule, even if he does so unwittingly. And again, he claims that he is not contributing to these things, that his work is not contributing to potential power of the Antichrist. But that's why we're here to expose his line of thought, because from an actual Orthodox Christian perspective, from the actual ideas and visions of elders and saints, what he's doing and what he's building is directly correlative to the centralized control system that is going to dominate the planet.
And again, it's
what does Mars mean?
Well, is it just a scientific project, or is it, I don't know, is it like a Heinlein,
a vision of a new society?
Yeah, Heinlein, you know,
populated
the
by
moon as a
many
libertarian
people
paradise or something like
from
this.
Elon Musk.
Well,
right,
I don't know if it was concretized that specifically, but if you concretize things, then maybe you realize that Mars is supposed to be more than a science project. It's supposed to be a political project. And then when you concretize it, you have to start thinking through, well, the woke AI will follow you, the socialist government will follow you. And then maybe you have to do something other than...
You know, that's nice and all, but Grok is also pretty woke on a variety of topics. So, you know, it's famous, what was it, 4 or 5 years ago when Elon smoked the joint on Joe Rogan podcast. And in that conversation, he talked about the apocalyptic scenario of AI and why it's so dangerous and how he thinks we have a very small chance of surviving. And then, as I've talked to you more recently, you know, Tesla AI is leading the world right now in applicable robotics. So one could say, according to Thiel's presentation here, that Elon changed his tune and now decided that he also need to get into the AI arms race so that it isn't quote unquote woke, but Grok is basically the same. So yeah, they're constantly reprogramming Grok all the time to be woke. Yeah, especially on, you know, certain topics that I'm sure you could come to a conclusion on what they may be. And so what are you talking about? It's just, this is just a race amongst individuals of immense wealth and power to make sure it's their vision and their narrative that moves forward. I mean, that's what Musk is doing. He's just racing other people through his companies and his investments so that he leads, you know, Starlink is going to lead the, you know, the state of internet access. Neuralink is going to lead the state of brain computer interface. Tesla is going to lead in regards to EVs, right? The goal is he's creating companies to set a precedent so he can monopolize the next phase of global economics, right? And the technocratic control system.
And just going to Mars.
Okay, so the woke AI. Artificial intelligence seems like one, if we're still stagnant, it's the biggest exception to stagnation.
Yes.
It's the place where there's been remarkable progress, surprising to many people progress. It's also the place we were just talking about politics. It's the place where the Trump administration is, I think, to a large degree, giving AI investors a lot of what they wanted in terms of both stepping.
Absolutely. And that is part of Project Stargate. Remember, I did a stream actually with Jay Dyer on his channel talking about Project Stargate when it revolved around the 1980 CIA project for remote viewing. Ironic that remote viewing is also tied with the new AI arms race that, again, Project Stargate is a $500 billion investment with Larry Ellison of Oracle, Sam Altman, and then the Japanese CEO of SoftBank, I believe it's those three gentlemen. So $500 billion federal investment into AI. Yeah, I think Trump definitely conceded to some of the tech oligarchs. I think that's a fair statement.
Back and doing public-private partnerships. So it's a zone of progress and governmental engagement. And you are an investor in AI. What do you think you're investing in?
Well, I don't know. There's sort of a lot of layers to this. So I do think I don't know. There's one question we can frame is just how big it.
Well, you think the guy that has this much money could have a speech pathologist? Like, just, I get it. Maybe you had a stuttering problem. Maybe this is something has plagued you your whole life. But dude, if you're a billionaire, like, get a speech pathologist. Like, can we get a thought out without stuttering?
A thing. Do I think AI is? And it's, I don't know. My stupid answers. It's more than a nothing burger, and it's less than.
And by the way, for those watching, this is actually a much better interview of Peter Thiel. Like, if you're worried about his stuttering or you get annoyed with it like I do sometimes, he's actually speaking very clearly in this interview compared to other ones where the stuttering is out of control.
The total transformation of our society. So my placeholder is that it's roughly on the scale of the internet in the late 90s, which is, I'm not sure it's enough to really end the stagnation. It might be enough to create some great companies. And, the internet added maybe a few percentage points to the GDP, maybe 1% to GDP growth every year for 10, 15 years. It added some to productivity. And so that's sort of roughly my placeholder for AI. It's the only thing we have. It's a little bit unhealthy that it's so unbalanced. This is the only thing we have. I'd like to have more multidimensional progress. I'd like us to be going to Mars. I'd like us to be having cures for dementia. If all we have is AI, I will take it. There are risks with it. There are there are dangers with this technology.
So you're a skeptic. But then you are a skeptic of what you might call the sort of superintelligence cascade theory, which basically says that if AI succeeds, it gets so smart that it gives us the progress in the world of atoms, that it's like, all right, we can't cure dementia. We can't, figure out how to build the perfect factory that builds the rockets that go to Mars, but the AI can. And at a certain point, you pass a certain threshold and it gives us not just more digital progress, but 64 other forms of progress. It sounds like you don't believe that, or you think that's less likely.
Yeah, I somehow don't know if that's been really the gating factor.
What does that mean? The gating factor?
It's probably a Silicon Valley ideology, and maybe in a weird way, it's more liberal than a conservative thing, but people are really fixated on IQ in Silicon Valley, and that it's all about smart people.
Right.
And if you have more smart people, they'll do great things. And then the economics anti-IQ argument is that people actually do worse. The smarter they are, the worse they do. And it's just they don't know how to apply it, or our society doesn't know what to do with them, and they don't fit in. And so that suggests that the gating factor isn't IQ, but something that's deeply wrong with our society. So
is that a limit?
Well, and this is a residue again of the Enlightenment, the elevation of reason as the sole source and authority of knowledge and of certainty. It's kind of a presupposition of even the modern Silicon Valley elite that are so obsessed with IQ, pattern recognition, and that IQ, this is the basis for their functionalist theories, that if whatever we can do, if there's a functional equivalent of the computer, then the computer is functionally the same level of intelligence. And this is how they're measuring, and this is their grand theory about a sentient AI, is that functionally it will be identical. But again, that reduces human anthropology and the essence of personhood to pattern recognition, which I think is false from the get-go. That's why I don't believe in sentient AI as a possibility. In the fact that they're equating the bridge between their anthropology and their computer construction is it's an IQ bridge. It's a pattern recognition bridge. It's a functionalist bridge, a philosophy of mind theory. So it's like, that's not what constitutes a human person. We are way more complex. And in fact, this is where the eugenics residue of transhumanism is still present. because eugenics was, they were trying to find objective measuring systems to evaluate the different races and ethnicities of the planet. And IQ was one of the barometers that they tended to focus on as, and there are IQ differences. Read the bell curve if you're not familiar with that. However, especially from a Christian perspective and belief in the Imago Dei, Genesis 1:26, we cannot be just reduced to a system of pattern recognition, essentially a biological algorithm, which is what Dadaism is professing in Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari.
On intelligence, or a problem of the sort of personality types that human superintelligence creates? I mean, I'm very sympathetic to the idea, and I made this case when I did an episode of this podcast with a sort of AI accelerationist, that just throwing that certain problems can just be solved if you ramp up intelligence. It's like we ramp up intelligence and boom, Alzheimer's is solved. We ramp up intelligence and the AI can, figure out the automation process that builds you 1 billion robots overnight. I'm an intelligent skeptic in the sense I don't think. Yeah, I think you probably have limits.
It's hard to prove one way. It's always hard to prove these things, but
until we have the superintelligence.
I share your intuition, because I think we've had a lot of smart people and things have been stuck for other reasons. And so maybe the problems are unsolvable, which is the pessimistic view. Maybe there is no cure for dementia at all, and it's a deeply unsolvable problem. There's no cure for mortality. Maybe it's an unsolvable problem, or maybe it's these cultural things. So it's not the individually smart person, but it's how this fits into our society. Do we tolerate heterodox smart people? Maybe you need heterodox smart people to do crazy experiments, and if the AI is just conventionally smart, if we define wokeness, again, wokeness is too ideological, but if you just define it as conformist, maybe that's not the kind of smartness that's going to make a difference.
So do you fear then a plausible future where AI in a way becomes itself stagnationist, that it's like highly intelligent, creative in a conformist way? It's like, the Netflix algorithm. It makes infinite okay movies that people watch. It generates infinite okay ideas. It puts a bunch of people out of work and makes them obsolete, but it doesn't, it like deepens stagnation in some way. Is that a fear? It's like people just outsource.
It's quite possible that's certainly a risk, but I guess where I end up is I still think we should be trying AI, and that the alternative is just total stagnation. So there's sort of all sorts of interesting things going to happen with, maybe drones in a military context are combined with AI, and this is kind of scary or dangerous or dystopian, or it's going to change things. But if you don't have AI, wow, there's just nothing going on. And I don't know, there's like a version of this discussion on the internet where did the internet lead to more conformity and more wokeness? And there are all sorts of ways where it didn't lead to quite the cornucopian, diverse explosion of ideas that libertarians fantasized about in 1999. But counterfactually, I would argue that it was still better than the alternative, that if we hadn't had the internet, maybe it would have been worse. AI is better. It's better than the alternative, and the alternative is nothing at all. Because here's one place where the stagnationist arguments are still reinforced. The fact that we're only talking about AI, I feel, is always an implicit acknowledgement that but for AI, we are like in almost total stagnation.
But the world of AI is clearly filled with people who, at the very least, seem to have a more utopian, transformative, whatever word you want to call it, view of the technology than you're expressing here, right? And you were mentioned earlier the idea that the modern world used to promise radical life extension and doesn't anymore. It seems very clear to me that a number of people deeply involved in artificial intelligence see it as a kind of mechanism for transhumanism, for transcendence of our mortal flesh and either some kind of creation of a successor species or some kind of merger of mind and machine. And do you think that's just all kind of irrelevant fantasy? Or do you think it's just hype? Do you think people are trying to raise money by pretending that we're going to build a machine god, right? Is it hype? Is it delusion? Is it something you worry about? I think you would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would
this is a long hesitation.
Imagine that he asked, do you want the human species to exist? And well, one thing I would like is I don't know, maybe, I mean, yeah.
This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit in this.
Should the human race survive?
Yes.
Okay.
But I also would I also would like us to radically solve these problems.
Right.
And so it's always, I don't know.
How is that the alternative? Do you want the human race to survive? Well, I want them to radically solve these problems. Don't they have to survive and exist to solve the problems? It's because he knows that his vision is ultimately transhuman. And so that's where he's like trying to toe the line here. Yeah, he wants the humans to exist in a transhuman form so that they can solve his utopian problems.
Transhumanism is this, the ideal was this radical transformation where your human natural body gets transformed into an immortal body. And there's a critique of, let's say, the trans people in a sexual context, or a transvestite is someone who changes their clothes and cross dresses. And a transsexual is someone where you change your penis into a vagina. And we can then debate how well those surgeries work. But we want more transformation than that. The critique is not that it's weird and unnatural. It's so pathetically little. And we want more than cross-dressing or changing your sex organ.
He's like, just me as a gay man. The transvestites and the transsexuals I hang out with. It's just not enough. It's just not enough. We have to go further, the penises that turn into vaginas. I'd say it's not enough. When I like a woman, she has to have XY chromosomes, but we need more change than just transvestites and transsexuals.
Organs. We want you to be able to change your heart and change your mind and change your whole body. And then Orthodox Christianity, by the way.
Tell us, Peter, what is it about Orthodox Christianity that's so insightful to this transvestite and transsexual conversation?
The critique Orthodox Christianity has of this is these things don't go far enough. Like that transhumanism is just changing your body, but you also need to transform your soul. And you need to transform your whole self.
Oh, so this is the Christian Transhumanist Association, the CTAs, again, hodgepodge taking of theosis and saying, well, transhumanism is theosis. It's a total transformation of the human. Okay, and here we're seeing the same rhetoric out of Peter Thiel. Orthodox Christianity, believes in like a total transformation of the person. Yeah, that's spiritual and it's biologically instantiated. This isn't something that just happens by a technological transformation.
And so,
right, but the other wait. I generally agree with what I think is your belief, that religion should be a friend to science and ideas of scientific progress. I think any idea of divine providence has to encompass the fact that we have progressed and achieved and done things that would have been unimaginable to our ancestors. But it still also seems like, yeah, the promise of Christianity in the end is you get the perfected body and the perfected soul through God's grace. And the person who tries to do it on their own with a bunch of machines is likely to end up as a dystopian character.
True. So, and who would have thought the liberal boomer would actually be able to steelman our position better than the Christian Peter Thiel?
Well, it's let's articulate this.
And you can have a heretical form of Christianity, right? That says something else.
I don't know. I think the word nature does not occur once in the Old Testament, and so
so this is his argument that Christianity doesn't value a natural human body over transformed transhumanist body.
You know, if you and there is a word in which a sense in which the way I understand, the Judeo-Christian inspiration is
Judeo-Christian. Here we go. You guys are definitely going to get something really insightful and traditional.
It is about transcending nature. It is about overcoming things, and
yeah, you transcend the fall of nature, but it's through natural means. It's through the way in which God created the universe. It's not through transhumanism.
And the closest thing you can say to nature is that people are fallen, and that's the natural thing.
No, it's actually unnatural. It's the state of nature itself, but that was not the full intention of nature. So nature in its true ideal natural form is not fallen. The
Christian sense is that you're messed up, and that's true. But there's some ways that with God's help, you are supposed to transcend that and overcome that. And
right. But the people, present company accepted, most of the people working to build the hypothetical machine God don't think that they're cooperating with Yahweh, Jehovah, the Lord of hosts. They think that they're building immortality Ross, on their own.
Yeah, we're
right?
jumping around a lot of things. So
yes.
Again, the critique I was saying is they're not ambitious enough.
Right.
From a Christian point of view, these people are not ambitious enough.
There you go. From a Christian point of view, Silicon Valley, AI development, and transhumanism is not ambitious enough. The Christians view the transvestites and the transsexuals as not ambitious enough. You guys have heard it here. Peter Thiel, your Christian prophet, telling you that if you're a Christian, you actually see these people as not going far enough. We need to go further.
Now, then we get into this question. Well, are they
they're not morally and spiritually ambitious enough.
And are they still physically ambitious enough? And are they even still really transhumanists? And this is where, the cryonics thing, that seems like a retro thing from 1999. There isn't that much of that going on. So they're not transhumanists on a physical body. And then,
right.
Maybe it's not about cryonics. Maybe it's about uploading. Which, it's not quite. I'd rather have my body. I don't want just a computer program that simulates me. So that uploading.
I agree.
President-elect says Peter speaks for Christians now. Well, yes. If you haven't seen since, what was it, 6 months ago, I did a video on Peter Thiel with an interview he did with the Hoover Institute at Stanford. And that's where he really came out and professed himself as a Christian. And he's worried about the Antichrist. And he thinks that we need to normalize Christian eschatological rhetoric. And so, is he Christian? I wouldn't consider him one. But has he been utilizing his platform and voice to be a voice for Christians in regards to tech and AI? Yes, he has been. So if you didn't know, yes, he certainly has been presenting himself as that.
seemed like a step down from cryonics. But then even that's, you know, it's part of the conversation, and this is where it gets very hard to score. And I don't want to say they're all making it up and it's all fake, but I don't think
you think some of it's fake.
I don't think it's fake. Implies people are lying, but it's I want to say it's not the center of gravity.
Yeah,
and so there is there is a cornucopian language. You know, there's an optimistic language. A conversation I had with Elon, you know, a few weeks ago about this was he said, you know, we're going to have 1 billion humanoid robots in the US in 10 years. And I said, well, you know, if that's true, you don't need to worry about the budget deficits because we're going to have so much growth. The growth will take care of this. And then, well, he's still worried about the budget deficits. And then this doesn't prove that he doesn't believe in the 1 billion robots, but it suggests that, you know, maybe he hasn't thought it through, or that he doesn't think it's going to be as transformative economically,
right,
or that there are big error bars around it. But yeah, there's some way in which these things are not quite thought through. If I had to give a critique of Silicon Valley, it's always bad at, you know, what the meaning of tech is, and the conversations, they tend to go into this microscopic thing where it's okay. It's like, what are the IQ ELO scores of the AI, and, you know, exactly how do you define AGI, and we get into all these endless technical debates. And there are a lot of questions that are at an intermediate level of meaning that seem to me to be very important, which is like, what does it mean for the budget deficit? What does it mean for the economy? What does it mean for geopolitics? You know, one of the conversations, you know, we had a few, you know, recently was, you and I had was, you know, does it change the calculus for China invading Taiwan, where, you know, if we have an accelerating AI revolution in the military, is China falling behind? And will this, and maybe on the optimistic side, it deters China because they've effectively lost. And on the pessimistic side, it accelerates them because they know it's now or never. If they don't grab Taiwan now, they will fall behind. And either way, this is a pretty important thing. It's not thought through. We don't think about what AI means for geopolitics.
And this is where, again, you can see the sentiments align with essentially the military-industrial complex. I'm not saying China is not a threat. Anybody who's saw like their 100 to 200 year plan for the, you know, the destruction of the United States, I mean, they're thinking long term, and they are an existential threat to some degree. But I'm against, as an American and nationalist, I'm against us being this global military police. And, you know, we need to let these things kind of work themselves out. But he's very big on the threat of China, and they are a threat. I'm not downplaying that China doesn't have nefarious intentions and plans. But who do you think then is trying to monitor this situation? Palantir, right? I mean, is it really that far off from like the neocon talking points? I mean, we need to invest in this nation, and our biggest threat is China may take Taiwan. And then it gets back to the superconductors and all that stuff that Taiwan's able to make. It's like, I think we have other problems as well.
We don't think about what it means for the macro economy. And those are the kinds of questions I'd want us to push more.
There's also a very macroscopic question that you're interested in, that, you know, will pull on the religion thread a little bit here. You have been giving talks recently about the concept of the Antichrist, which is a Christian concept, an apocalyptic concept. What does that mean to you? What is the Antichrist?
How much time do we have?
We've got...
Okay, here we go. So he's got Bible verses. He's going to now present his Christian case for the Antichrist being basically some blue-haired liberal who runs a one-world government and prevents technological advancement. I mean, he doesn't use those terms, but just listen now to how he describes what the Antichrist would be.
As much time as you have to talk about the Antichrist.
All right. Well, I could talk about it for a long time. I think there's always a question. You know, how do we articulate, you know, some of these existential risks, some of the challenges we have. And they're all framed in this sort of runaway dystopian science text. There's a risk of nuclear war. There's a risk of environmental disaster, maybe something specific like climate change, although there are lots of other ones we could come up with. There's a risk of, bioweapons. You have all the different sci-fi scenarios. Obviously, there are certain types of risks with AI. But I always think that if we're going to have this frame of talking about existential risks, perhaps we should also talk about the risk of another type of a bad singularity, which I would describe as the one world totalitarian state. Because I would say the political solution, the default political solution people have for all these existential risks is one world governance. What do you do about nuclear weapons? We have a United Nations with real teeth that controls them, and they're controlled by an international political order. And then something like this, is also what do we do about AI? And we need global compute governance. We need a one world government to control all the computers, log every single keystroke.
Again, mind you, he's now going to, once he gets pushed back here in a few minutes, he's going to reject the idea that the technologies and the companies he's investing in are actually contributing to what he's describing right now. So for him, it's all about a centralized political governmental control that he believes is going to be like woke left, progressive, and stagnant in regards to his stuff. And the irony is that if anybody were to create or even move towards creating a total centralized government, they're going to need all the tools that he himself is aiding to be built right now. And yet he sees no connection between these.
To make sure people don't program, a dangerous AI. And I've been wondering whether that's sort of a, going from, the frying pan into the fire. And so the atheist philosophical framing is one world or none. That was a short film that was put out by the Federation of American Scientists in the late 40s. Starts with the nuclear bomb blowing up the world. And obviously you need a one world government to stop it, one world or none. And the Christian framing, which in some ways is the same question, is Antichrist or Armageddon. You have the one world state of the Antichrist, or we're sleepwalking towards Armageddon.
What eschatological frame says that we have to choose between the Antichrist and Armageddon? Both events are going to occur. What? We don't have to choose one or the other.
One world or none, Antichrist or Armageddon, on one level are the same question. Now, I have a lot of thoughts on this topic, but sort of one question is, and this was a plot hole in all these Antichrist books people wrote. How does the Antichrist take over the world? He gives these demonic, hypnotic speeches, and people just fall for it. And so it's this plot hole. It's this daemonium.
Right. It's implausible.
It's a very implausible plot hole.
Right.
But I think we have an answer to this plot hole. The way the Antichrist would take over the world is you talk about Armageddon nonstop. You talk about existential risk nonstop. And this is what you need to regulate. It's the...
Wait. Wasn't the first 3/4 of this interview about Peter Thiel talking about the existential threat of stagnation, the existential threat of China, the existential threat of the lack of innovation and where liberal democracies and the status quo is moving us towards? That's where the framing on what he says the Antichrist would do. Now, obviously, Peter Thiel is not the Antichrist. Elon Musk is not the Antichrist. Donald Trump is not the Antichrist. But Peter Thiel, at least within the theological framing he's presented here, is certainly presenting something that is similar to the spirit of Antichrist. I mean, the delusion, and I would say the sort of spiritual prelest that he sees the things he invests in and what he's doing is totally unconnected with a potential rise of an Antichrist figure. It's like, dude, how do you not see that? How do you not see that Palantir and automated AI military equipment would be used for a certain group of people to take over the planet? What do you mean?
Opposite of the picture of Baconian science from the 17th, 18th century, where, the Antichrist is like some evil tech genius, evil scientist who invents this machine to take over the world. People are way too scared for that. In our world, the thing that has political resonance is the opposite.
But that's what we just talked about, how many people view AI being that machine. He just said people won't buy into, the machine. What we just, again, throughout this conference, we just talked about the state of AI, and that certainly some people developing and many people using have the expectation that AI is going to be a sort of mechanical god. What?
It is the thing that has political resonance is we need to stop science. We need to just say stop to this. And this is where, I don't know, in the 17th century, I can imagine a Dr. Strangelove, Edward Teller type person taking over the world. In our world, it's far more likely to be Greta Thunberg.
That is so naive. That is so naive for somebody that is in those elite circles, gone to the Bilderberg groups, knows, has rubbed shoulders with the elite of the world, that our biggest threat is the Greta Thunberg. She's more likely to be an Antichrist figure. No. He literally admitted about his schizophrenia regarding lobbyist groups and how American politics work because wealthy people can influence it. How dare you? How dare you, Peter Thiel?
Okay, I want to suggest a middle ground between those two options. It used to be that the reasonable fear of the Antichrist was a kind of wizard of technology. And now the reasonable fear is someone who promises to control technology, make it safe, and sort of usher in what, from your point of view, would be a kind of universal stagnation of, right?
Well, it's more, that's more my description of how it would happen.
Right.
So I think people still have a fear of a 17th century Antichrist.
Yes.
We're still scared of Dr. Strangelove.
Right, but you're saying the real Antichrist would play on that fear and say, you must come with me to avoid Skynet, to avoid the Terminator, to avoid nuclear Armageddon.
Yes.
And I guess my view would be, looking at the world right now, that you would need a certain kind of novel technological progress to make that fear concrete, right? So I can buy that the world could turn to someone who promised peace and regulation if the world became convinced that AI was about to destroy everybody, right? But I think to get to that point, you need one of the accelerationist apocalyptic scenarios to start to play out, right? To get your peace and safety Antichrist, you need more technological progress. Like, one of the key failures of totalitarianism in the 20th century was it had a problem of knowledge. It couldn't know what was going on all over in the world, right? So you need the AI or whatever else to be capable of helping the peace and safety totalitarian rule. So don't you think you need your worst case scenario to involve some burst of progress that is then tamed and used to impose stagnant totalitarianism? You can't just get there from where we are right now.
Exactly. The guy's making, again, the boomer journalist, leftist, is making the point, even in your scenario with the Antichrist having global control, we would need immense technological advance in the areas that you support and fund for that to be the case. And of course, we're going to see that he doesn't want to answer that and doesn't really think that he's part and parcel of it.
Well, it can
like Greta Thunberg's on a boat in the Mediterranean, right? Like protesting Israel. Like I just don't see the promise of safety from AI, safety from tech, even safety from climate change right now as a powerful universal rallying cry, absent accelerating change and real fear of total catastrophe.
I mean, these things are so hard to score, but I think environmentalism is pretty powerful. You know, I don't know if it's absolutely powerful enough to create a one world totalitarian state, but man, it is.
I think it is not.
It is
in its current form.
It is. I want to say it's the only thing people still believe in Europe. Like, you know, they believe in the green thing more than Islamic Sharia law, or more than in, you know, the Chinese communist totalitarian takeover. And the future is an idea of a future that looks different from the present. The only three on offer in Europe are green, Sharia, and, you know, the totalitarian communist state. And the green one is by far the strongest. In
a decaying.
You know, and I would push back on that a little bit. I would say the nationalist narrative, or the nationalist sovereign narrative, that nations are sovereign, able to make their own decisions. I think that's actually the more powerful narrative than global climate change, even in Europe. But he is true in the fact that the Europeans are much more driven by that issue than maybe the American populace per se. So, but I think there's other narratives that can equally rival the climate change narrative. In fact, I think the climate change narrative has actually dissipated. Like, I'm thinking when I was in my undergrad during the Obama administration, like, I almost feel like that was the peak of the climate warming narrative. Of course, it's now rebranded as climate change. But I'm curious what you guys think. I mean, don't you feel like the climate change narrative is actually kind of waning in its ultimate political power? And that people are more interested in like political sovereignty. And I feel like this has even been true in America regarding people are so much more in favor of like drilling for oil and fracking and things like this that were kind of polarizing issues environmentally before. I don't know. Oh, Jay Hamza just gifted 5 more Codal Crew memberships. Thank you so much, Jay. God bless you, brother. Really, really appreciate your support. And Haley's in the chat, throws in 5. Thank you so much, Haley. God bless you guys. And God bless you, Jay. Really appreciate your support, brother. Thank you very much.
Europe, it's not a dominant player in the world.
It's always in a context.
Right.
And then I would, you know, I don't know, you know, we had this really complicated history with the way nuclear technology worked. And, you know, we didn't really get to, you know, a totalitarian one world state. But, you know, by the 1970s, one account of the stagnation is that the runaway progress of technology had gotten very scary, and that, you know, Baconian science, it ended at Los Alamos, and then it was, okay, it ended there, and we didn't want to have any more. And, you know, when Charles Manson took LSD in, you know, the late 60s and started murdering people, what he saw on LSD, what he learned was that you could be like Dostoevsky, an anti-hero in Dostoevsky, and everything was permitted. And of course, not everyone became Charles Manson, but in my telling of the history, everyone became as deranged as Charles Manson.
But Charles Manson did not become the Antichrist and take over the world, right? We're ending in the apocalyptic.
No, but my telling of the history of the 1970s is the hippies did win, and we landed on the moon in July of 1969. Woodstock started 3 weeks later, and with the benefit of hindsight, that's when progress stopped and the hippies won. And yeah, it was not literally Charles Manson.
Okay, but I want to stay with the Antichrist just to end, right? And you're retreating. You're saying, okay, you know, environmentalism is already pro-stagnation and so on. Okay, let's agree with all that. But we're not living under. We're not living under the Antichrist right now. We're just stagnant, right? And you're positing that something worse could be on the horizon that would make stagnation permanent, that would be driven by fear. And I'm suggesting that for that to happen, there would have to be some burst of technological progress that was akin to Los Alamos that people are afraid of. And I guess this is my very specific question for you, right? Is that you're an investor in AI. You're deeply invested in Palantir in military technology, in technologies of surveillance, in technologies of warfare, and so on, right? And it just seems to me that when you tell me a story about the Antichrist coming to power and using the fear of technological change to sort of impose order on the world, I feel like that Antichrist would maybe be using the tools that you were building, right? Like, wouldn't the Antichrist be like, great, you know, we're not going to have any more technological progress, but I really like what Palantir has done so far, right?
Yeah,
I mean, isn't that a concern? Wouldn't that be the irony of history would be that the man publicly worrying about the Antichrist accidentally hastens his or her arrival?
Exactly.
There are all these different scenarios. I obviously don't think that that's what I'm doing. I
mean, to be clear, I don't think that's what you're doing either. I'm just interested in how you get to.
Well,
I do think that's what they're doing.
A world willing to submit to permanent authoritarian rule.
Well, but again, there are these different gradations of this we can describe. But is this so preposterous, what I've just told you, as a broad account of the stagnation that the entire world has submitted for 50 years to peace and safetyism? This is 1 Thessalonians 5:3. The slogan of the Antichrist is peace and safety, and we've submitted to the FDA regulates not just drugs in the U.S. but de facto in the whole world, because
peace and safety, like Palantir's promise for predictive surveillance, so that they can predict that crimes will occur before they do, so that they can protect us and save us? You mean like maybe technologies like that are literally built in the name of peace and safety? Like, again, the cognitive dissonance here and the internal blindness to see. He quotes Thessalonians and talks about that the Antichrist will promote peace and safety, and that's literally what his companies are doing. What? Like, you think the FDA's the Antichrist? Oh, come on, bro.
The rest of the world defers to the FDA. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission effectively regulates nuclear power plants all over the world. People, you can't design a modular nuclear reactor and just build it in Argentina. They won't trust the Argentinian regulators. They're going to defer to the U.S. And so it's at least a question about why we've had 50 years of stagnation. And one answer is we ran out of ideas. The other answer is that something happened culturally where it wasn't allowed. And then the cultural answer can be sort of a bottom-up answer, that it was just some transformation of humanity into this sort of more docile kind of a species, or it can be at least partially top down, that there is this this machinery of government that got changed into this stagnations thing. I think something like this. Nuclear power was supposed to be the power of the 21st century, and it somehow has gotten off-ramped all over the world on a worldwide basis.
Wow, could that potentially be to corporate interest and money, or is that just due to the FDA and bureaucratic institutions that are supposed to monitor these programs? I mean, obviously it's both, because the corporations control these institutions, these government institutions that he's talked about that the public has lost trust in, and therefore then regulate so that the corporations can make sure that they get their kickbacks and are making money. I mean, a la Big Pharma. I mean, this goes back to Edison and Tesla regarding AC versus DC. Like what?
No.
So in a sense, we're already living under a moderate rule of the Antichrist in that telling. Do you think God is in control of history?
Man, this is again like I think that there's always room for human freedom and human choice. These things are, or at least where we are today, these things are, they're not, they're not absolutely predetermined one way or another.
Right.
But
God wouldn't leave us forever under the rule of a mild, moderate, stagnationist Antichrist, right? That can't be how the story ends, right?
It's attributing too much causation to God is always a problem. If I don't know, there are different Bible verses I can give you, but I'll give you John 15:25, where Christ says, "They hated me without cause," and so it's all these people that are persecuting Christ have no reason, no cause for why they're persecuting Christ. And if we interpret this as a ultimate causation verse, they want to say, I'm persecuting because God caused me to do this. God is causing everything. And the Christian view is anti-Calvinist. God is not behind history. God is not causing everything. If you say God's causing everything,
but wait.
And this is where it's again, this is a much more delicate conversation about free will and causality in relationship to creation. God is the cause of all things. God's will allows all events to occur. At the same time, God's will is for us to have free will in which we can be our own unmoved mover and have a causal effect in creation as well. So it's both and. And definitely we're not Calvinists. We don't believe in predeterminism. But yeah, God is behind history. Miracles do happen. God saves certain groups in battles and weird occurrences occur. So God's not divorced from history, but also God's imminent presence in history doesn't nullify our free will in history either.
You're scapegoating God.
But God is behind. But God is behind Jesus Christ entering history because God was not going to leave us in a stagnationist, decadent Roman Empire, right? So at some point, God is going to step in.
I am not that Calvinist, and
that's not Calvinism, though. That's just Christianity.
It is just Christianity. God became man so that man can become God by grace. That is history. That is Christianity. That does not make one a Calvinist.
God will not leave us eternally, staring into screens and being lectured by Greta Thunberg, right? He will not abandon us.
Correct.
To that fate.
Unless, again, God never abandons us because the second coming essentially saves us from wherever this is going. But certainly us making the free will choice to stare into our black mirrors is going to move us closer to the point in which the Antichrist arrives. So again, it's both and. God will allow us to make the choices, but again, as people repent too, that date is pushed further back. It's much more dynamic.
There is a great, I don't know, for better and for worse, I think there's a great deal of scope for human action, for human freedom. If I thought these things were deterministic, you might as well, maybe just accept it. The lions are coming. You should just have some yoga and prayerful meditation and wait while the lions eat you up. And I don't think that's what you're supposed to do.
That's true. Yeah, you're not supposed to allow it to happen. That's where repentance, and notice for a Christian presenting his Christian view on the Antichrist, morality, repentance, relationships with God, family, children, none of these things are mentioned by Peter Thiel. The whole thing is about GDP go up and technological advance goes forward. That's literally the only metric it looks like he's judging the world by.
I agree with that. And I think on that note, I'm just trying to be hopeful and suggesting that, in trying to resist the Antichrist, using your human freedom, you should have hope that you'll succeed, right?
We can agree on that.
Good. Peter Thiel, thank you for joining me.